Hello everyone and welcome to Shark Day 2020. We're here on ExeterMarine social media channels to celebrate sharks, to raise awareness about amazing creatures that are sharks, and talk about all the amazing shark science going on at the University of Exeter. So right now we've got Kristian Parton with us to chat more about his research and all things sharky. So Chris, how have you been? How is lockdown affecting your studies?
It's going okay actually. So I'm in Florida at the moment. I managed to get in just before they closed the borders down. So I'm kind of stuck here at the moment. But it's going okay. It's given me a little bit more time to sort of get the corrections and things done. But I know for a lot of people, they've struggled because a lot of their stuff is very field research based, and lots of field work's been cancelled, and trips abroad have been cancelled, which is really difficult. Fortunately, I'd managed to get all of my data collection done before we got hit with this pandemic. So it's going okay for me, I would say.
That's super lucky. That's really lucky. Speaking from my experience, I'm quite jealous that you've managed to get everything sorted just before this hit. So you've recently published your second paper, or it will be published. It's been accepted for publication. How challenging was it to be able to get that done with all of these extra challenges that you're facing during lockdown?
I think, yeah. So the paper, I think, will be coming out pretty soon, maybe in the next week or so from when this goes live. So that's really exciting. I'm so happy. It's been a little bit challenging, I think, mainly because everything now is being done remotely. So communicating with co-authors has all been done remotely. Communicating with my supervisors as well. But then with the journals as well, I think there's just a bit of an extended waiting time for them to kind of get back with various corrections that I need to make. And so everything's just sort of been delayed a little bit. So I think I submitted this paper it was back in December. So it was really kind of before the pandemic actually hit. And it's only starting to come out now. So it's probably been a good 6 months or so to try and get it to the stage now where it's ready for publication. But I think that's probably been prolonged due to coronavirus and the pandemic. So it's taken a while, but thankfully now we're getting somewhere with it, and I'm really, really excited to show everyone some of the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, that must be an absolutely huge relief, and we're all super excited to read what you've been up to. Moving on to that, so what do you think are the top 3 threats that threaten sharks worldwide?
So, I mean, my research is looking at how plastic pollution impacts shark species. And I would straight off the bat say that plastic pollution is definitely not within the top 3 threats to sharks globally. My kind of list for that would be problems with overfishing. So the depletion of shark stocks globally all across the world. That would definitely be in the top 3. Bycatch, so incidental bycatch of sharks and the accidental bycatch of sharks, that's definitely going to be depleting shark numbers. And then you go more towards the threats like shark finning as well. So, it's an estimated 70 million sharks are killed for their fins every single year. And it's thought it could be potentially 3 times more than that number. So that's millions and millions of sharks being killed purely for their fins, to be used in traditional medicines, to be used as shark fin soup in certain countries. So yeah, I would say those are probably the 3 biggest threats. And then you start going into problems faced with climate change. So climate change is going to be affecting shark species as we move into the future. And then further down the list is the problems associated with plastic pollution, which is the stuff that I research here at the University of Exeter.
There is just an incredible array of things threatening sharks, and those numbers are just, you can't even comprehend how many that is. That's
Yeah, and
just
I think it's
insane.
really important that we understand the variety of different threats that sharks face, because some sharks will be more threatened by, you know, some things compared to others. So it's important to understand all these different threats so that we can start to put in mitigation strategies that help protect them from these threats. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. And I imagine the shark's biology has a big impact on what specifically they're most vulnerable to as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So in my entanglement research that came out last year, we were trying to figure out which shark species might be more at risk from entanglement within plastic pollution, and the kind of biology of sharks did play a factor in that, as in where they lived, sometimes what their body shape was like. So, for example, manta rays have those fantastic cephalic fins that come out in front of the face, and those areas on the shark, those kind of extra appendages, are really susceptible to being entangled within various bits of plastic pollution. So yeah, a shark's biology definitely plays a role in what threats it's more likely to be threatened by.
Of course. So you're nearing the end of your Master by Research here at the University of Exeter in Penryn. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You've got your papers published, you're doing great, but what's next? I know that's a terrible question, but
That's a very tough question. I mean, it's been a long time coming. So I started my MRes immediately after I finished my undergraduate in 2014. So not 2014, 2017. I started my undergraduate in 2014, started my MRes in 2017. So it's been 3 years now. So it's been a long time coming, a lot of hard work. But in terms of what's next, I think the last few years has reminded me how much I enjoy being out in the field, I think. Because part of my MRes was very laboratory based. So I was in the lab for hours and hours and hours. And I think that made me realize how much I missed being out in the field and being in the water with these animals. So next for me is probably getting back out there into the water, and doing some direct research with them. As to what research that will be, I'm not 100% sure yet. So we'll have to wait and see.
yeah. I miss them so much. It's only been a few months for me since I got back, but I just miss being in the water with them so
Yeah,
much as we all do it, right? Because we
exactly.
absolutely adore being with these animals. So in your opinion, do knowledge gaps still persist in our understanding of how entanglement and plastic ingestion are affecting shark populations?
Yeah, so one of the kind of main reasons I got into doing what I am doing here at the University of Exeter is because there are such big knowledge gaps. So in terms of entanglement, we know that that impacts a variety of different marine species. Specifically, turtles have been highlighted to be devastated by entanglement within ghost fishing gear, which is fishing gear that is lost by fishers, and indiscriminately catches various marine organisms. So turtles have been highlighted to be really negatively impacted, but we didn't really know that much about how it impacted sharks. And that was kind of one thing that I wanted to explore in a little bit more detail, just because we didn't really know much about it. There were only a few anecdotal reports on entanglement for sharks, and part of my research was collating all those reports together to try and figure out, which families might be more at risk, which ocean areas maybe hotspots for entanglement. So from an entanglement perspective, definitely there are knowledge gaps. Looking at ingestion of plastics, there's been a little bit more research done for sharks and microplastic ingestion, but again, there still remains a few knowledge gaps in terms of which species are more affected. Is it the filter feeding elasmobranch species like whale sharks, basking sharks, or manta rays, or is it, more pelagic based shark species, or is it shark species that live in and around the bottom that are feeding on kind of small crustaceans and things like that, but also ingesting some of the bottom sediment. So I would definitely say there are knowledge gaps that could be explored in further detail, particularly in terms of the impact that, in regards to microplastic ingestion, the impact of ingesting those particles. We don't know yet how that's going to be impacting sharks, whether it's going to be causing, internal changes to various systems in their bodies, like their endocrine system, their reproductive system. I mean, there have been studies that have shown those impacts on other fish species, but at the moment, we're not quite sure whether it impacts sharks in the same way. So there are definitely knowledge gaps to be explored in further detail, for sure.
Yeah, of course, because there are lots of aspects to plastic ingestion, harmful aspects that aren't so widely known, like, for example, how toxins can accumulate and be stuck to these bits of plastic and then ingested.
Yeah, exactly. Inorganic pollutants are a big issue in regards to microplastic ingestion. So that's pollutants that have attached themselves to these petrochemical based compounds that are microplastics, and they have been shown to have impacts on various internal systems of fish species. So we might expect that to be happening with sharks, but at the moment we're still not 100% sure, and definitely need to look into it in further detail.
There's still so much to be done and so much to learn, which I think is something that's makes this field so exciting as well.
Yeah, it's such a growing field too. I mean, there's so many people that are doing some amazing research on microplastics and marine animals, and it's a changing industry as well. It's growing every day. We get better at being able to detect certain plastics, so it's quite exciting to see where the industry is going to move towards in the coming years, because it's so rapidly changing.
Yeah, it's exciting though. It's exciting. So what has been your most memorable shark encounter?
Oh wow, that's such a good question. I think I've probably got two, I would say. So the first one is the first time I ever saw a shark, which I would consider a pretty life-changing moment for me. I was in Mozambique. I just learnt how to scuba dive, and so I was out there with my dad, and we were diving just off the coast of Mozambique. One of my first dives. I'm not very good with my buoyancy, so I don't really know what I'm doing. And I remember the PADI, yeah, exactly, up and down. I was all over the place. But I remember the PADI instructor sort of kind of grabbed my tank and shook me a little bit, and I didn't really know what he was doing. And he pointed up towards us, and this massive oceanic white-tip shark just cruised straight past me. And I just remember thinking to myself how unbelievable this creature was. It seemed huge. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't huge. Everything seems a little bit bigger underwater, but it was just such an incredible experience, and was my first experience seeing a shark. And from then on, I had this passion that wouldn't go away. I've always loved sharks since I was a kid, but seeing one in person for the first time was amazing. And then I'd say my second kind of favorite experience with sharks was in the Philippines. So I was on a brilliant research project called LMAVE. It's the Large Marine Vertebrate Project in the Philippines, and they do some great research over there on whale sharks and the effect of an ecotourism operation on whale sharks. And I was there for, I think it was about 4 months, and every single day I was in the water with whale sharks. So these sharks are provisioned by the fishers in the surrounding area, which brings them in. So there's a little bit of controversy there as to whether that's going to be impacting the sharks. And the purpose of LMAVE is to try and figure out, is this impacting the sharks, and how might it be impacting the sharks? But I was there for 4 months, and every single day was in the water with these animals. And on some days, I remember free diving down to 10 or 12 meters and looking up, and within my eye shot I could see 14, 15, 16 whale sharks, and seeing that is just I'll never ever forget that image in my head, and also just getting to learn a lot of the sharks' personalities, because often the same individuals will come back day to day, and they all have different personality traits, which is something maybe you don't often imagine for sharks. But I was convinced that these sharks displayed various different personality traits. I remember, I think it was shark ID number 6. He used to chase scuba diver bubbles. He was obsessed with scuba diver bubbles, and the bubbles that were created by fin kicking. He was utterly obsessed with bubbles, and you could actively see him enjoying those bubbles, whether he was using them as a sort of kind of massage or something. But that was just something really amazing to see. And other sharks were really bold, who would just kind of, I remember at the end of the session, so as the water's quietening down a little bit, I can't remember which ID shark it was, but there was a shark every single time that used to stick around a little bit longer than the others. And you'd be swimming around looking for sharks, and then suddenly this shark would be right behind you. And he used to play, it was almost like a game. He used to play this game where he'd see if he could sneak up on you, and having this 7-8 meter animal almost toying with you in that way was just an amazing experience. So yeah, I'd say those are my 2 favorite shark experiences of all time, but I've had so many amazing experiences with sharks. I love them just so much.
That is just, it's so incredible. I remember when I saw my first whale shark, and it was a baby whale shark out in Thailand, and I completely lost it. It was just such a magical experience. I can't even imagine what it'd be like to have like 15 above you.
Yeah. Well,
I'm very jealous.
For everyone at home, if anyone has the opportunity to go and swim with whale sharks anywhere in the world, I would 100% recommend doing that. It's a life-changing experience, and they're such magnificent animals.
They're just so beautiful, so peaceful. Oh, I love them. That was an amazing shark encounter. I was mesmerized. I was just just imagining all these sharks. So moving a little bit back to the ground, as it were, what advice would you give to young graduates who are wanting to get into shark science?
So I think in terms of young graduates trying to get into shark science, I would recommend to them try and find some kind of niche, some kind of knowledge gap that's there. And that's how I kind of fell into my research, was that we didn't know a lot about how plastic pollution impacted sharks. And so that was a knowledge gap and a niche that I found. And so I would recommend for anyone who's wanting to get into it is to really scour through the literature and read papers and try and ask yourself questions to see if they've been answered. And if they haven't been answered, explore that in further detail. And then it's about finding researchers that you want to work with as well, and whose interests and passions align with yours. I mean, I have 2 amazing supervisors in Brendan Godley and Tamara Galloway, who have supported me all the way through it, and we've been able to pair our knowledge and expertise on different subject areas and created some amazing research. And then finally, I would just say, never give up. Always keep knocking on the door, keep sending the emails, never give up. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something, because you can. I was knocked back a number of times when I was trying to kind of get my place as an MBRes student studying sharks, and it can be quite demoralizing being knocked back, but never give up. Always keep pushing that door down, and eventually something will come through. So yeah, those would probably be my 3 top tips for any young aspiring shark scientist out there.
Absolutely. I know in the past I've been described rather as tenacious, relentless sometimes in my door knocking and my quest to achieve what I want to achieve. And Yeah, absolutely. If you're passionate about sharks, like that'll come through when you're speaking to these academics that you want to work with, for
Mm.
sure. And that's the most important thing. So, oh, you've got me dreaming about whale sharks now. Like my mind's in a different place. Um, but to bring the interview to a close, we have some questions from Tommy, age 13, from Florida. And he would like to know, what are some strange items that have been found inside the stomachs of sharks?
That's a good question. So it obviously depends on the shark species, but sharks have been known to consume some very odd things. Tiger sharks, in particular, have been known to consume weird items, things like car number plates, for example, parts of rubber tires, bins, just an array of strange items. And that's partially to do with the fact that tiger sharks are scavenger feeders, so they will pretty much eat anything and everything. So that's some strange things, definitely. In my research, in the ingestion research that we've done, I didn't find anything particularly strange, although coming out, you might be able to see with the research, we started finding fibers that you might find in your clothes, for example. So when you wash your clothes in a washing machine, those fibers are released from the clothes, go towards wastewater treatment plants, where some of them might be retained, but some of them will not be retained, and those will head out into the oceans. And so those shark species that I was researching had actually ingested fibers that are from our clothes, which is quite a shocking find as well, and something you might not expect sharks to be eating.
Yeah, and that feeds into Tommy he sent in a few questions. He would also like to know how much plastic is in the ocean and how does it affect wildlife?
Oh, very good question, Tommy. So it's thought there's between 5 and 12 million tons of plastic enter the oceans every single year, which is a huge number of plastic. In terms of microplastics as well, it's thought there's estimated between 5.25 trillion pieces of microplastic in the ocean. So the numbers that we're talking about here are huge numbers. In terms of how it might be affecting wildlife in the ocean, it falls again under my two broad research questions. So ingestion in one hand and then entanglement in the other. So ingestion is the consumption of plastic particles, whether they be microplastic particles, which are smaller than 5 millimeters in diameter, or macroplastic particles, which would be slightly larger. And those can have impacts in their bodies and can cause damage inside their bodies. In terms of the entanglement perspective, we're talking about larger pieces of plastic, things like ghost fishing gear, but also everyday items of debris as well. So you might find plastic bags, plastic straws. And from an entanglement perspective, wildlife is getting caught up in this plastic. And that's really important for shark species because many shark species require to move forwards to continue being able to breathe. And so being entangled in various plastics can often immobilize them. And then unfortunately that leads to their death. So a lot of plastic in the ocean, unfortunately, Tommy. But there are now campaigns to try and reduce the amount of plastic that we're using. So I would recommend to anyone watching at home to reduce, reuse, and recycle plastic when they do have to use it, and sign up to various campaigns that promote the reduction of plastic in our society.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. To everyone at home, if you'd have more questions for Chris, he'll be watching on the social media channels all day. So type them in the comments, like, share. And you can also find us on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube as well. We'll be posting lots of awesome content throughout the day. So please do share, spread the word about amazing shark science and how important they are for us in our oceans.
Bye.
Bye.